Um, Sorry, my name is Thomas McShane, and I'm the moderator here. I just wanted to let everybody know just to keep your microphones on mute, and a very big welcome to Patrick Feuerstein today.
All right, shall I start right away?
Please.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Sorry, we're a little bit late because we thought we could stay in the other room where we had the first presentation of this kind. So welcome to the session on working conditions on online translation and transcription platforms. As Thomas already said, my name is Patrick Feuerstein. I'm part of the Fairwork Project that is hosted by the Oxford Internet and the Oxford Internet Institute and the Berlin Social Science Center. I'm part of the Berlin team, so I'm based in Berlin here. And I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity today to discuss with you the crucial topic of working conditions on online translation platforms. I think this topic is particularly important for those of you who are just about to start their career as a professional translator. What I'm going to present to you today is based on the translation and transcription platform reports, the Fairwork Project published in 2022 and 2023 that you can find via the link that I've put down at the bottom of the slide here. So what we do in these reports is we evaluate and rank working conditions on online translation and transcription platforms. Translation and transcription platforms are an important part of what we call cloud work platforms. Cloud work platforms are these kinds of platforms that mediate the supply and demand of services and service provision by people that can be based anywhere in the world, basically. So you know platforms like Amazon Mechanical Turk, you know platforms like Fiverr, Upwork, where software engineering jobs are done. Then there's, of course, some things about graphic designs. And there's also platforms that mediate translation and transcription services. And if you look at the whole sector of cloud work platforms, you see that the language industry actually is an important and quickly growing sector within that market. So according to Statista, the market size of the language services industry has doubled between 2009 and 2019. So online translation and transcription platforms who are a part of that industry offer a good opportunity for new workers who want to work as transcriptionists or as translators, and particularly from the global south. That opens avenues to customers from the global north that were previously closed to these groups of workers. So there's a lot of benefit to these online translation and transcription platforms, but we also know that they come with a lot of disadvantages that are often very precarious working conditions. And let me just highlight some of the most important risks and harms that we see on online translation and transcription platforms. First of all, there's often very low pay and unpaid labor. So compared to regular translation jobs or other freelance agencies, online platforms often have very low rates. And since workers on these platforms are often classified as independent contractors, there's always very often no obligation to pay them a minimum wage, even when those minimum wage regulations exist in the country where the worker is working. Unpaid labor is an important aspect for translators on these platforms. If you think of an online translation platform in a way that you have an account there, and then you register as a translator, and then you get a list of tasks and jobs that is available on that platform. And then you have to find the job that you want to work for, or that you want to work on. So that means that you have to check the jobs, their requirements, the specifications. You have to see whether you're eligible to do the job. And all that time that you spend on searching the job, screening the jobs, reloading the list of jobs, is actually working time that is not paid at all. So you might end up working 6 or 7 hours on the platform by just searching for jobs, and you end up doing paid tasks for, let's say, 5 or 4 hours. So that makes like 3 or 2 hours per day that is not paid at all. And that further reduces your earnings if you want to work via that platform. Another issue is actually long hours. So given the low rates that online platforms usually offer, you have to work very, very long hours if you want to make a living from that job. since many platforms do not have effective systems to manage the supply and demand of labor on the platform, there's also the problem that there are more and more people signing up to these platforms. So in your case, there's more and more translators available on these online translation platform. And that, of course, increases the competition for jobs and lowers that's lowering the fares and the rates that you get. And it also makes it more difficult to get the job. That in the end leads to more unpaid working time when you search and apply for jobs. And a lot of translators we talked to in our study actually confirmed that there's an increase in competition in recent years. We also have unsafe working conditions. So working long hours in front of your screen with your computer, of course, is risky to your physical health. Many people we talked to said that they have problems with their back and all that stuff that that come from working in an office. So that's the general risks that are associated with that job. But there are also specific mental risks when it comes to online translation platforms. Some translators we talked to said that they end up working on violent or otherwise disturbing content, and this is not flagged to them when they apply for the job. So if you think, for example, that you have to translate 911 calls, or that you have to translate interviews that are done with suspects or people in prisons that elaborate on the violent actions that have been committed or whatever. So you can imagine what kind of content you might end up working on. And most of the platforms we analyzed do not have any system in place to indicate that disturbing content to the people applying for that job. So if you start working on the content, it might already be too late. You've already been confronted with that kind of content, and you might not feel comfortable with that. And if that becomes too much, of course, there's also risk for your mental health in the end. Then, of course, there's also always the chance for harassment and violence towards women and minority groups. And we also have documented cases where this is happening and where these platforms do not have any effective measures in place to protect workers against these occasions of harassment and violence. Then, of course, discrimination and unfair management is also an issue. It's always an issue, but it's also an issue on discrimination on online translation platforms. So this is particularly the case for women and ethnic minorities who are discriminated by the customers, for example. Like for when a customer thinks that if they want to translate like a text from German to English, there are people applying from different regions of the world, and they just hold the view that people from a specific region do not have the kind of language skills that is required for that job, and this is solely based on the background of the country of residence of the translators. This, of course, is highly unfair, and there's also often no system in place from the platform side to mitigate this risk of discrimination by the customer. Unfair management also concerns how your account actually is treated and how you are treated on that platform. So in most cases, the platforms can deactivate and close accounts just whenever they want. And if they do so, there's no way for workers to appeal these decisions. They can also issue low rates. So you can lower your rates on the platform. That also has an effect on the jobs you can get and the jobs you can apply for. And again, these decisions by the platforms are often they're done just by the platforms, and there's no effective appeals process for workers to complain or even to challenge these decisions by the platforms. We also have, I will talk about that a little bit later on this example. We'll see that when we have the league table that I will show in a couple of minutes. Last but not least, there's a lot of individualization going on the platforms as people are spread all over the globe. Workers are in a structurally weak bargaining position vis-a-vis the platform, so there's usually you do not have a lot of chance to negotiate the rates, but they are given by the customers or the platform. And it's also very difficult to organize or to coordinate some kind of collective power if people are not close to each other. They don't work with each other, but they all apply and they all compete with each other. So collective representation is very, very difficult on these online translation platforms. All right, given these risks and harms on online translation and transcription platforms, but also other digital labor platforms, the private project intends to not only better understand working conditions on digital labor platforms, but also help improve the working conditions. And to that purpose, we have set up a global network that is hosted by, as I said, the Oxford Internet Institute and the WZB Berlin Social Science Center. And we evaluate and rate companies all over the globe. So last year, we have done the evaluation of digital labor platforms in 39 countries, plus 20 platforms that operate on a global level. That what I explained is cloud work platforms, like platforms that employ or work with people that are spread all over the globe. So this is really a big network, and we try to get a global view of what is going on in the platform economy here. For that purpose, we are cooperating with a wide range of universities and research institutions. And our main funding at the moment comes from the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. But some country teams and for some research students, you also have funding from different sources that you can see here at that slide, on that slide. So how do we evaluate working conditions on, for example, online translation platforms? To measure fairness on platforms, we have come up with 5 principles of fair work that are about fair pay, fair conditions, fair contracts, fair management, and fair representation. And for each of these principles, you can see that there are 2 thresholds. Like, for example, for fair pay, the first threshold is that the platform has a mechanism in place that makes sure that workers are paid timely and for all completed work in a recognized national currency. And the second threshold, that is slightly higher here, is that the vast majority of workers on that platform earns at least their local minimum wage. So irrespective of where you are, we check whether you make at least enough to be above the local minimum wage when you work for that platform. For fair condition, it's about the measures to limit competition, and by that limit overwork and underwork and unpaid search time, but also to have policies in place to protect workers from work-related health and safety risks, like, for example, that system of flagging violent or otherwise disrupting content that I mentioned before. For fair contract, the first threshold is that there are contracts or terms and conditions are available that workers can access. That is not always the case. So when you enter or when you access the platform, when you register for that platform, when you want to work for that platform, you should be given the terms and conditions that are governing your working relationship to the platform. And there should always be like a way for you for legal recourse. So in case the platform is violating the clauses or the regulations in the terms and conditions, you should be able to have legal recourse. The second threshold for fair contracts here is that the contracts are consistent with the workers' terms of engagement on the platform. That means if the platform claims to be like a mere marketplace where customers find services provided by independent service providers, of course, workers should also be free to act accordingly. So there should be no non-compete clauses where the platform says, hey, if you've been working with a customer via our platform, you're not allowed to contact that customer again in the next year via another platform or independently, because that is not what market behavior looks like, right? So we also check the terms and conditions, whether they reflect the terms of engagement here. Fair management is all about communication channels and appeal processes. So there should be a documented process through which workers can appeal platform decisions. That includes the deactivation of the account. And that means that there should also be a channel available to workers to appeal outside of the platform, because you can't appeal anymore when your account is blocked. And there should also be a policy to mitigate the risk of discrimination against workers by platforms or clients. For fair representation, the first threshold was whether there is a process of dispute resolution. So in case there is a conflict between the workers and the platform about pay, about the quality of work, there should be a way for workers to have access to a dispute resolution mechanism that is independent, and they should be free to choose their advocate in this process, like a union or an independent ombuds team, an ombuds board, as some platforms do. And the second threshold here is the platform publicly and formally recognizes an independent collective body of workers. This can be something like a works council, but this can, of course, also be a union of platform workers. You see, every principle has two thresholds, and for each threshold, there is 1 point that can be awarded. So each platform ends up with a score between 0 and 10. And this is what we call the scorecard that we produce for each of the platforms we are evaluating. How do we evaluate? So the data that we use comes from 3 sources. So we do our desk research. So we try to get hold of all the information that is publicly available on platforms. That might be the processes that we have access to. That is the contracts and terms and conditions that are available on the website. Then we talk to workers from these platforms via an online survey to get the information from their side, their perspectives, learn about challenges and problems of the platform. And then we also always talk to the managers of the platform and ask them to provide evidence and share their views on these issues. And then we put it all together. So we take the evidence from all these 3 sources and come up with a preliminary scoring that is then shared with the platforms again. So the platforms know before we publish the scores what their score looks like, and they have another 2 months of time to make changes or provide additional evidence that might impact the scores. And only if we have given them that additional time, we publish the final score in a league table that you can see here. So this is the result of our 2023 translation and transcription platform scores. And you can see the huge differences between platforms here. And this is for us always the most important message, that there's no, like, the working conditions on these platforms are not like an automatic outcome of technological development, of the platform model in general or whatever, but it's management decisions. And these decisions are very different from platform to platform. So you can see here that we have a wide range of platforms where we were not able to award a single point, which does not necessarily mean that the platform does not meet the threshold, but it means that we were unable to evidence that they meet these thresholds. So we tried our best to get all the information we could from the desk research, the worker interviews, and the consultations with the management, but we were unable to evidence that they meet any of these thresholds. But for other platforms, like, for example, Creative Words translated 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10, that looks rather good. And Creative Words is a very interesting example in this regard, because they were really eager to work with us in these 2 months that I mentioned before. And they did a lot of changes to their business model to increase their score and to improve the working conditions on the platform. So I think they jumped from a 5 to 10 in these 2 months. And they were the first companies in our ratings that got to the 10 out of 10 level. So Translated did a lot of changes the year before, so they are also very engaged and very committed to making changes to the business model and improving the working conditions. So that's really a difference between the platforms in the regard to, like, how they are interested in improving the working conditions. If we take a closer look at the results, we see that it's only been 4 platforms that have been able to evidence that they had systems in place to ensure that workers are paid in time. And I think this is very concerning. And there was only 2 platforms, Creative Words and Translated, that were able to evidence that the vast majority of workers actually earns above the local minimum wage. And what we hear a lot from translators when we present these results is that many translators do not consider their job to be a minimum wage job, right? So a lot of translators complain, hey, you give a point because people earn the local minimum wage, but as a translator, I do not want to earn the minimum wage, but of course I want to earn a lot more than that, because this is a profession. I'm doing here a great job. I'm very qualified for my job. So this is usually not considered a low wage or minimum wage job. So this is to be kept in mind when you look at the score. So even 10 out of 10, even if you get the second threshold for fair pay, this means that this is about minimum wages, right? Which is an important benchmark. As you can see, many of these platforms do not reach this threshold, but it just means that you earn at least the local minimum wage. For fair conditions, that was only Creative Words and Translated who got the points for the systems to manage the allocation of work and reduce unpaid working time, and that were able to evidence that they have measures to mitigate work-related health and safety risks for workers. To the contracts, we see that 4 platforms, Creative Words, Translated, Unbabel, and Transcribe Me, were able to evidence accessible contracts in clear language. And we only had 3 platforms, Creative Words, Translated, and Transcribe Me, that were able to provide evidence that contracts are consistent with workers' terms of engagement. And there was also only 3 platforms, Creative Words, Translated, and Transcribe Me, that evidenced that workers can actually communicate with a human platform representative and that they have documented and effective appeals processes for workers. I think this is also a very concerning result here. And it was only Creative Words and Translated that were able to evidence that they have anti-discrimination policies. And last but not least, when it comes to fair representation, it was only Creative Words that put out this public statement that they would be willing to negotiate and bargain with an independent union or worker group if there was any, and by that they also committed to an independent process of dispute resolution. So again, fair representation, there was only 1 platform that could be awarded a point here, or that we had evidence that they could be awarded a point. So this is also a very concerning result here. Okay, I will stop here now. 25 minutes, almost over. I hope my short presentation has made you aware of some of the most important problems with online translation platforms, but I also hope that at the same time it has shown the significant differences between the platform and that it's worth taking a close look at where you want to work as a translator. And I really hope that our ratings that we do with the Fairwork Project, that we've done in the past and that we will do in the future, will be of some help for you in this way, and that you find the right place to work in the future. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much for that talk, Patrick. It was really interesting, and there was a lot to take in 25 minutes. We've got a few minutes here for questions and answers. And if you don't mind, I suppose I'll start with one. What would you recommend for young translators, for people who are starting out in the field? How would you recommend that they communicate with these types of companies in order that the companies don't exploit them or take advantage of them?
Yeah, I think, like, of course, the first point could be to check our scores, whether we have a rating available for that platform. But like you've seen, it's a small sample, right? So there are so many online translation platforms out there. And of course, we do not have all of them in our sample. So we do not have a rating at the moment for all of them. But I think our principles give a good orientation for workers to check the platforms before you register to it. So you can screen the platform, you can go through the terms and conditions and check whether the platform provides these things for you and whether it's a good employer or not. So not employer, but a good platform to work with or not. So I think, or I hope that our principles and our benchmarks can give some orientation, some guidance when you're doing this.
Absolutely. It seems like an excellent framework. And I want to invite anybody else to ask a question. You can unmute yourselves, or you can put the question in the chat.
I've seen the questions here on the examples of these platforms. I hope that this was covered by the league table.
Sorry, do you have a question there, Rudy? Oh, very good. So did you take into account the difference between translation companies with a platform and purely virtual platforms?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So if you look at the industry, you see that the line between purely virtual platforms and I would call them traditional freelance agencies, is becoming more and more blurry, right? So it's the traditional freelance agencies that are moving towards becoming a platform. And you'll also see some platforms who become more like they are more engaged with the translators that are working for them. So at the moment, we rate them both with the same set of principles, but we made sure that the companies we have in our sample are more on the virtual platform side, in order to make sure that the platform principles apply here.
Well, because the difference in outcome is quite predictable with companies like Translated and Creative Words, who have a completely internal structure to meet the requirements, and the other ones who do not have that, who are
Yeah.
completely focused on the virtual collaboration.
Yeah, that's true. I think the main difference there is that the companies like Translated and Creative Words have a human in the loop, basically. So they, even if they have this online system to allocate jobs, there's still someone in between that is checking all the things that, for example, make sure that violent content is flagged. But we also see similar approaches on platforms who come from the purely virtual side, and they want to implement these human oversight in the process to mitigate these risks that I've mentioned. So this is why there's a lot of movement in the sector and a lot of change in the business model. So it's very interesting to keep track of that. And it's, when it comes to recommendations for young translators, this is something that you can look out for. So if there's something like a system like that, that at least mitigates some of the risks.
So in some ways, would you recommend that it's better to be working from an online platform that then outsources to a traditional company, which then assigns the jobs to translators? Because
That is hard.
the
Maybe
human
you
connection.
are. Yeah, I think you might be in a better position to answer that question, because I didn't do any evaluations of traditional freelance companies. So we can't do a comparison between rather traditional translating agencies and the online platforms. So that's very hard for me to give a recommendation here. I just can highlight how these online platforms actually relate to basic minimum standards as represented in our principles. And something similar had to be done with the other job opportunities, basically.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have a question? If you have a question that occurs to you later, feel free to go onto the platform. There's an option to send a message or through the chat function there. So I think that's all we have time for today. Do you have any closing remarks, Patrick? Or
no, just thank you so much for your attention, and all the best for your career. And in case you come up with a question later on, don't hesitate to get in touch or send me an email or put it in the chat, and I will try to respond to your question now.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for being here with us. Enjoy the
Have a great rest of the event.
Absolutely. All right.